Clash Royale is no stranger to many different strategies and ways of playing the game. That being said, there are some things in the game that you really just shouldn't be doing. So here are 13 more things in Clash Royale that you just might be doing wrong. The first mistake you might be making is not splitting your archers. The archers are a strong 3 elixir card that I personally enjoy using, especially when they're evolved, but they are often way too easy to counter with arrows or even log depending on the situation if you play them both on the same side. Instead, you can either place the archers in the very back middle of the arena to split them, or if you're already building up a push from the back on one side or both, feel free to split them closer to the bridge, which will force your opponent to counter both sides since the lone archer will get some damage if left unanswered. This strategy will allow you to avoid getting easily countered, and it'll force your opponent to spend more elixir to defend your pushes. The next mistake is simply using the minion horde. Now don't get me wrong, I have nothing against minions, and I actually think they're a strong card both on defense and offense. In fact, the minion horde does give you more minions for a cheaper cost per minion than a regular minions card. That extra value does come at a cost though, as your opponent can simply use the arrows or even fireball on your minion horde to take it out for a positive elixir trade. This is different from the regular minions, where using arrows against them would be an even trade and using fireball against them would be a negative trade for your opponent. If you do decide to throw the horde into your deck, I'd recommend taking a page out of the last tips playbook and splitting them in the back to get more value and put pressure on both lanes. The next mistake I see people make all the time is ignoring the pushing mechanic in Clash Royale. If you don't already know, you can actually push slower troops like the P.E.K.K.A. to get them to the tower much faster by simply placing them at the bridge and then placing a faster card like a Hog Rider or some goblins behind them. You need to line this up correctly though, since if you put the Hog Rider off to the side even just one tile, he'll most likely just push past the P.E.K.K.A. and go to the tower on his own, most likely leaving your push ineffective. So especially if you already use the Hog Rider, goblins, or another fast moving ground troop in your deck, I'd recommend giving this strategy a try since you might just catch your opponent off guard and get an easy win. This next tip is simply sleeping on the skeletons. The skeletons are an amazing and versatile card that can fit into pretty much any deck archetype. Not only are they cheap at only 1 elixir, so they can help you cycle to your evolutions or win condition faster, but they can actually fully counter a lot of cards in the game, such as the mini P.E.K.K.A. along with several others. Any deck can benefit from using the skeletons since they can provide so much value for such a cheap price. Those of you who've played the game for a while might remember that the skeletons card actually used to contain 4 skeletons instead of 3, but this was way too overpowered, so Supercell nerfed them down to 3. But the card still remains very powerful to this day. So if you haven't given the skeletons a try yet, or if it's been a while since you've used them, go ahead and throw them in your deck and see what happens. The next mistake on our list is not going for King Tower activations. For those who don't know, your King Tower is activated when one of 2 things happens. Either one of your Princess Towers gets destroyed, or the King Tower takes damage in any way, whether it be by a troop or a spell. You can actually use this mechanic to your advantage to activate your own King Tower and make it harder for your opponent to break through since you have an extra cannon on defense. While there are some advanced strategies out there for activating your King Tower, I'm going to show you 3 simple ways you can do this in your next Clash Royale match. In the first scenario, we see an Electro Spirit coming towards your Princess Tower alone. As you know, the Electro Spirit will survive if it has full health and will be able to jump onto the arena tower. We can actually use the chain mechanic of the E-Spirit to our advantage here, as if we place a card right between our King Tower and our Princess Tower at the right time, the attack will chain onto our King Tower, activating it and making the match much harder for our opponent to win. In the second scenario, we see a lone Firecracker coming across the bridge towards our tower. This one's even easier, as all we have to do is place virtually any card on this tile, and the Firecracker's backsplash damage will activate our King Tower while saving our Princess Tower from damage at the same time. The last scenario is a great one to try out if you haven't already, and it's simply using the Fisherman to activate the King Tower. As you know, the Fisherman can pull cards towards him with his fishing hook, so if you have an incoming Hog Rider, Giant, or virtually any other high HP card, you can simply place your Fisherman around here and he'll pull the incoming troop onto your King Tower, which will not only activate it, but also cause the troop in question to take fire from all 3 towers at once, killing it quickly. You can mess around with the timing of the Fisherman placement depending on what card you're facing, but the Fisherman makes King Tower activation easy and fun. Just make sure you aren't on the other end of this interaction and don't let your Firecrackers and E-Spirits go out alone. Going with the theme of cards that pull other cards, the next mistake is not using the Tornado. Now I will admit, not every single deck in the game works well with a Tornado in it, but I would argue that most deck archetypes could benefit from having the Tornado included if you can make it work. The Tornado is one of the most versatile cards in the game, since not only can it help get King Tower activations, but it can be a huge help with getting a lot of value for your splash cards like the Wizard, Executioner, Bomber, or even Valkyrie. Not only that, but the Tornado can also line up shots for your Magic Archer or Firecracker to get a ton of damage on the tower. The Tornado can honestly be used in a million different ways, so if you haven't already given it a try, I would highly recommend it, especially if you have splash cards in your deck already. Next, we have ignoring split wall breakers. Whenever you play a game against a player who's using wall breakers, you'll usually see them split the wall breakers at some point. The reason they do this is so that you'll feel that it isn't worth it to defend them, and they hope you'll ignore them and let them keep chipping away at your tower. This chip damage can really add up though over the course of a match, so it's worth it to learn a few easy ways to counter the wall breakers when they're split. The best way in my opinion is to either place skeletons, archers, a musketeer, or even a building in the middle of your side of the arena so that the wall breakers get taken out before reaching your towers. This works well with some of the other tips on our list, since if you split archers to take out the wall breakers, you now have a free counter push that your opponent will have to defend too. Next, we have not using the Deck Explorer feature. If you're anything like me, you have a few favorite cards in the game that you like using whenever you can. For me, I love using the Evolved Knight and the Evolved Archers together. Sometimes it can be hard to make a deck from scratch though, so Supercell made a feature where you can add a couple of cards or even half a deck worth of cards and use the Explorer feature to show popular decks that include those cards. That way, if you don't want to play the same old boring meta deck from top ladder that you always play, you can use your favorite cards in a more sensible deck without having to create the deck yourself and figure out which cards work well together. So if you haven't given this feature a try, I'd say it's definitely worth trying out. Next, we have not using some type of bait. We've all heard of the classic log bait in Clash Royale, and most of us hate it. The reason why log bait is so hated is because the log bait player will purposely play a bunch of cards like the Princess and Goblin Gang to draw out your log, and then you won't have it when they use their Goblin Barrel, leading to a frustrating situation for you. Log bait doesn't have to be the only deck that does this though, as pretty much every spell in the game has multiple cards that it counters very well. So if you find yourself having trouble with a specific spell, for example Fireball with your deck, I'd recommend putting another card or two like the Flying Machine, Zappies, or Royal Hogs into the deck to trick your opponent into using their Fireball, allowing you to get a ton of value with your main card. Next, we have not keeping track of your opponent's elixir. Now don't get me wrong, you don't need to be a tryhard and physically keep a count in your head of the exact amount of elixir your opponent has at any given time, but it is smart to think about it in certain scenarios and use it to your advantage. For example, if your opponent plays a Golem in the back of the arena, you know they're sitting on 2 elixir at most. If you also have a lot of elixir at that point, it'd be smart to push with a high pressure card like a Hog Rider or Elite Barbs in the opposite lane. Since you know they're low on elixir, they won't be able to support their push and also counter your push on the other side, so they'll end up having to choose one or the other, leading to you either getting a ton of damage with your push and maybe trading towers, or better yet, them abandoning their heavy push altogether to defend yours, leaving you with an easy cleanup on the other lane. The next tip is to not ignore the death damage from the Skeleton Barrel. Every time you see a Skeleton Barrel floating towards your tower, it's tempting to just wait for it to go down and then time your Log or Barbarian Barrel so it takes the skeletons out without them doing any damage. While this may seem like a good option, the Skeleton Barrel deals nearly 200 death damage at max level, so that damage can add up very quickly. A better way to deal with the Skeleton Barrel is to either distract it with another building like a Tesla, or to use a Musketeer, Archers, or similar to take it out before it's too close to your tower. Then if you still want to log the skeletons, you can do that and still have a good counter push while not taking any tower damage. The next mistake is playing your Lightning or Fireball too early. Most people think you should play a Lightning or Fireball as soon as your opponent gives you value by placing something like a Musketeer in the back. While this is true, it's a lot better to wait until the troop is almost out of range of the spot where you can hit the tower and the troop with the same spell, because a lot of times your opponent will end up placing another troop like a Wizard, Sparky, or anything really in that same radius, allowing you to get even more value for simply being a bit patient. This is especially satisfying with the Lightning spell, as I can't tell you how many times I've waited until the last second to play my Lightning and ended up catching an extra Musketeer or Wizard, in many cases winning me the whole match. The next mistake on our list is using Royal Giant without the Fisherman. The Royal Giant and the Fisherman are like bread and butter, they just go together so well. And there's a good reason for this. We talked a little bit about the Fisherman before, and while he can be powerful in many different decks, he is the strongest when used with the Royal Giant. Since the Royal Giant is very susceptible to being taken out by tank killers like the P.E.K.K.A. and Mini P.E.K.K.A., the Fisherman is very useful for grabbing those troops and pulling them away from the Royal Giant. You don't have a lot of time to do this before the Royal Giant dies, so you want to pay attention to your opponent's timing and try to predict their counter with your Fisherman. Just one good play like this can win you the entire match, since the Royal Giant does so much damage. That being said, take your own advice and switch up your timing and placement of the Fisherman as well, so that your opponent can't easily predict it and take